What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 77 of the Around the Crease podcast. This week, Michael Ward and I are discussing prospect days. What should you do? What should you be aware of? And how should you actually decide which ones to go to are a couple of the big topics we discuss after talking with some college lacrosse coaches. And we also get in a little bit about the Premier Lacrosse League as they head into their playoffs and kind of revisit some of our thoughts and assumptions that we made before the league even started playing its first game. So we're going to get into that show right now. And if you enjoy high school lacrosse content, please hit that subscribe button and please hit the thumbs up and give this video a like. It really does help the channel. Everybody, on to the show. All right, we're back. Michael, welcome back to the podcast. I know we had a few weeks break. Like, this is the kind of time of year where lacrosse news is few and far between, especially in the high school realm. But figured it was time to come back. And now that the summer recruiting stuff is over, like there's still plenty going on. You know, it's one of those things like anybody who listened to my last podcast with Delaware assistant coach Trey Wilkes, you realize like the recruiting season never really ends for coaches, parents, or players. Like there's always in some form. It may ebb and flow during this time of year, but it never really stops. So we thought we'd actually take today and talk a little bit about kind of, I guess, more general ideas around prospect days, like what players and parents should be kind of looking out for, kind of some do's and don'ts and things like that. And I know you kind of have some opinions after your summer of probably paying a little bit more attention to that aspect of lacrosse than maybe you have in the past, Michael. I know you got a son that you've probably been paying attention to some of this stuff, but I think it's probably different now that you've kind of been more on the reporting end. So why don't you kind of kick us off and tell us what kind of some thoughts you've been having?
Well, it's funny that you say that, I'm on the reporting end. It makes you learn more.
Yeah.
I've learned more about the game, the whole idea, the whole aspect of recruiting, of coaching, of your because I'm looking at it from a different angle. So, it's given me a whole nother view.
You have to step back and kind of look at it from a broader picture than
right. It forces me to be honest with myself and honest about what the talents of my own personal child are. I have gotten to see so many good players. I mean, I really don't like knocking anyone's dream, and I'm not knocking anyone's dream, and I'm not knocking anybody. But if you haven't been around the country and if you haven't seen the talent that is out there, to tell me, and I've had this happen recently, different parents and saying my kid's looking at this and my kid's looking at that, and I'm like, I don't want to. I never want to be rude and be like, no, you shouldn't. But I'm like, did you watch this all-star game? Did you watch these high school kids? Did you watch this? Look at the kids on your team. So one of the things that I spoke with Coach Garland about, actually, when Coach Garland goes through and talks with all of his players, and he has to be that sort of devil's advocate.
Right.
And I remember my son, he said to my son, write down colleges you want to go to.
Yeah.
And I think he meant colleges you want to go play at, where my son was writing down colleges he wanted to go to.
Right.
So he had Harvard,
right.
Yale, Duke, and he's like, we're going to have to put those expectations a little lower. I'm like, oh no, he was just talking about college. He didn't think about that. Well, then we got to talking about a few other players, and we won't be mentioning those players, but he said he had to give one person and their parents a wake-up call. And this is what I thought everyone should sort of hear, maybe not in that personal of a situation where you might be heated, but just to keep us an outside.
Yeah.
He tells us to look at the roster of the team you might be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
What kid on that team can you beat out?
Yeah.
If you're not an All-American, if you're not an All-Stater, you got to realize that if you're looking at this certain levels, these are all-State. So were you All-State? Might want to pull it back.
Yeah.
Were you All-American? There are different levels. Are you the best one on your team?
Yeah.
And if you're not the best one on your team, where is the best person on your team going?
Yeah.
And you could, I'm granted, there are exceptions to every rule. And some kid might have not gotten the playing time he deserved in high school. He might have blossomed late. He might have really lit it up. I've seen kids who didn't play basically on their high school team go out in the summer and absolutely smash it.
Yeah.
Get recruited, sign, and still come back and not play on their high school team.
Yeah.
Now, I sort of, wonder about that, but that's a whole nother issue that I don't want to get in. But looking at it from the situation is, if are you better than the best kid on your team? Where is he going?
Yeah.
And if he's not going D1, and again, this obsession, and the obsession seems to be mostly here in a not hotbed area of this D1 thing. When you talk to the kids in New York, and I'm going to school.
Yeah.
I'm going to a good school. NESCAC. I mean, a lot of the really smart kids that I've been in touch with, they have their first choices, usually the Ivy League.
Yeah.
Because why, Ivy League, Duke, Notre Dame, Virginia. I mean, great schools.
Right.
But if it's going to be like a different school, but they can go to Tufts or they can go to Williams, they take that path and they don't look at it and think, oh, I'm not a D1 player.
Yeah.
They know they're great. I mean, they literally know they're great players.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is a great lacrosse. So I think it's a myth and a problem that I just sort of had going through, because I've been at summer tournaments at the end of the year. I've been at tryouts. Tryouts already have started for next year.
Yeah.
It starts in fall, but these are for the year-round teams. And just getting with parents and then asking me, and I'm like, you don't want to, should I go to this Villanova prospect camp? Should I go to the Penn prospect camp? And I instead of saying no, and saying you shouldn't, I basically said, do you know who Penn recruited last year? You should look at that position, the position your child plays, see who they recruited.
Right.
Then compare. Was he the All-American kid from Texas that's playing at Penn?
Yeah.
And your son might not be even playing? That should be a sign. Like, can you beat that kid out?
Yeah. Well, I think there's also, because it's, I don't want to say easier, because I'm not a talent evaluator, never claimed to be, but I think it's easier for us in our position, because we've seen more players, whereas, the average parent they probably haven't seen that kid play. Like, so there's no real level for comparison, but like, oh, he was all state in Texas, but that's Texas, or, that's this place, or that's this place, or kind of thing. Like, it's easy to dismiss, I guess, or easier to dismiss because you haven't really seen them play. And if they're, maybe just a freshman year, maybe they didn't play at Penn. We'll just keep using them as the example.
Right, yeah.
So, maybe they haven't played it wherever you're thinking about playing. So I think it's easier to dismiss. And obviously we're all biased to our own blood. So it's I think it's a harder wake up call. I've talked to a lot of coaches over the years, and one of the big things, and every one of them has said it, is that you gotta see who's, when you go to an event and you play, who's talking to you afterwards.
Right.
Is it the Petromalas, the Tierneys? Is it those guys, or is it the NAIA? Is it D3? Is it D2? You gotta look to see who's talking to you, because it's not coincidental if you leave an event and you get a bunch of phone calls from bunch of D3 guys. Now, and I'll link to the podcast with Coach Trey Wilkes below. One of the things he said is you really kind of gotta almost, and I've had a number of coaches tell me this, you kind of gotta be self-aware when it comes to that kind of thing. When you see that, it doesn't have to be D1 or bust. And like Coach Wilkes said, he's coaches really hate that. They hate hearing that, because that makes you feel like you don't really love lacrosse. You love the idea of lacrosse and playing D1 lacrosse, but you don't love playing it. Because if you don't go D1, you can just be like, all right, I didn't go D1, I'm out. A coach doesn't want a player like that. A coach wants a player I don't care where I play, when I play, or how I play. I just want to play. They want the guy that just, goes to sleep with the stick, wakes up with it, is hitting the wall at 4 a.m. Like, those are the guys that they want. And if you're not that guy, like, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, we kind of joked about, if you want to play Fortnite, go play Fortnite. But I mean, there's people making careers out of that too. Like, maybe that's where you should focus your attention, maybe. But again, like, we've made it abundantly clear. Like, I don't think either of us think like it's D1 or bust. Like, so you got to kind of realize, like, who's talking to me after these events, and then figure that out, and then you start to make plans. Like, all right, maybe I should look at these prospect days. Like, if you get calls from coaches at Tufts, like, look, when are their prospect days? And then see what other schools that are like Tufts, or, you go with the opposite to figure out where you want to go. Like, all right, if Tufts is a smaller school, like, let me look at a really big school in that area, or in D3 or D2 or whatever. And then you kind of start to narrow it into there. Like, do I like big school? Do I like small school? Like, I've had a bunch of coaches tell me, like, what do you actually want to do for life, for a career?
Well,
like,
that's the
it's
first
like,
question.
It's like, don't go to a liberal arts school if you don't want to have a liberal arts education. Like, if you want if you want a technical degree, like if you want to be an agriculturist somewhere, like, probably UNC is probably not the choice for you. Like, NC State would be better, or Georgia Tech would be a better school, because those are going to have the careers that you want. Like, what do you actually want to do? Because the odds of you being, I know we have the PLL, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later, but it's a very small amount of players right now. And, it's not baseball, it's not football, it's not these sports where, like, I mean, even then you look at the pyramid, it's very small compared to the high school and then whatever. But I mean, the odds of you making a career out of lacrosse are very, very, very slim. So you got to find, like, what do you want to do otherwise?
Right. The one phrase that gets repeated over and over to me from parents who have gone through it, coaches, travel coaches, is this isn't about the next 4 years. It's about the next 40.
Yeah.
Find the spot that fits you and then try to fit in. There were two kids. I believe there was a kid who played at Carmel. I don't know him personally. It was before I moved here, but he was on the lacrosse team here. I think he was a good player, very smart, super smart, went to Duke, not for lacrosse.
Yeah.
But went to Duke, walked on to the lacrosse team, and made it.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think he sniffed the game, but I think he was played with, he was a legit on the team. But you need to fill out a team for practice players too. If you could throw both lefty and righty, run your butt off, work your butt off, and that's something that you look for, that kind of dream could happen.
Yeah.
You could also, go MCLA, and there's different levels of that. Like, you can go to place. It's like, it's almost beer league. Like, you go and you work out and you play, and after you play, you go out with the other team and you're drinking beers. It's almost like a rugby thing. Yeah. Or there's high level. There's something there for everyone, but you have to have an honest assessment of what you want to do. And again, I'm going through this with my son, who's a junior.
Yeah.
He just started his junior year, and we're trying to figure out he's undersized. So we know that there's nothing even to look at now. Because he can't, at this size, it's just not going to work. I know he'll get bigger. I'm not little.
Yeah.
He'll grow. It's just timing.
Yeah.
But in that thing, I get to talk to coaches. I get to do this, and I get to sort of show my son this.
Yeah.
But for example, like this past weekend, Mike Chanichuk, who runs Long Island Express, was in Indiana.
Yeah.
He was speaking to a whole mass of people about, this is what we do. We put you in. He was speaking to parents that were looking at this new program.
Yeah.
And he was telling the parents, saying, I'm not putting you in Division I because you want to be in Division I.
Right. I'm
putting you on the team that you're going to play with.
Yeah.
And he said, I've put 600 players into college. I've put 38 something in the PLL.
Yeah.
He's like, my son is an all-star. I mean, he's telling these people who, this is, he's got the Long Island guy came right out, and it was great. I was cracking up. But he sort of he spoke the truth.
Yeah.
And I think he said, what's the point of trying to be on D1 if you're not going to play? He said, not only does he put people in the right spots, he goes, but inevitably someone doesn't listen.
Yeah.
and they go to the wrong spot.
Yeah.
And he goes, so I also put them in the second spot. So when they realize they made a mistake, he's like, then I place them where they should have been.
Yeah.
And he like, that's what I come back to. He's like, because if you see the attrition that happens first year to second year, there are kids who just they don't, it's a whole new experience, and all of a sudden they're away from home.
Yeah.
It's almost full time, and they just can't handle it, and they leave, and then they go, oh, well, maybe I want a little something less intense.
Yeah.
And then they fall into that. That my only thing is I need parents to sort of understand that, because if they don't, I mean, I've just been looking at it. I just see it, like the heartache, like the anger, like the bitterness, like, yeah, they didn't do that, and then bitterness towards other kids, like, well, how did that kid make it? My kid's and I'm like, come on, I don't want them to. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. And it's a shame when you see it from here, because they haven't. And I'm talking the region.
Right.
Like, there's people who I talk to, and I'm like, have you ever seen Brother Rice play? And they're like, no. I'm like, then I'm gonna go watch Brother Rice, and look at all those kids.
Yeah. Not
all of them are going D1.
Yeah.
I mean, a bunch of them are.
Yeah.
I mean, their whole starting lineup is.
Right.
But that's I go, and that team would go out east, and they'd have a hard time. Look at St. Anthony's. There's kids sitting on the bench at St. Anthony's who are going to go D1.
Right.
They would come here on most teams and just absolutely dominate. And it's something special when you get to see that. And that's the education. And and there again is to make it full circle of what I like to do, and what I like to do is sort of help the Midwest rise.
Yeah.
Educate people. I think there are, there's got to be at least 40 D1, D2, D3, MCLA, maybe 50 within like a 3-hour drive of me.
Yeah.
Like, Ohio is loaded, and Michigan is loaded with, and Indiana's got a strong D3 programs.
Yeah.
At great schools: Kenyon, Denison, Oberlin, Ohio Wesleyan. I mean, these are DePaul, Wabash. That if you look at their rosters, there's kids from California, Texas, the East Coast, whatever. Like, they know it. I bring out a school up named here. They're like, oh, where's that? I'm like, it's 2 hours away.
Yeah.
Like, you don't, if you don't know who Denison is, and you're playing in the Midwest, if you don't know what a great school that is as far as lacrosse, I mean,
you haven't explored your options. You haven't really done the homework.
That's a major team. Like, that's a legit team.
Yeah.
Ohio Wesleyan, all these. I mean, if you look down your nose at those things, I'm like, well, then you're going to be in for a big mistake, because I was sent an email, and they said that they were looking at their fallback schools of D3 schools. And I'm thinking, your fallback schools are D3 schools? I don't know if you'll even be able to play on a D3 team.
Yeah.
I couldn't say that. I actually sent the email to somebody else, and I said, this is what drives me nuts.
Yeah.
But this person's telling me about their D1 player, but they're going to look at some D3 programs as a fallback.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess I've never really understood the same philosophy, and I covered football for years before I covered lacrosse, and it's no different. It's D1. I mean, there's more opportunities in football than there are in lacrosse, by far. But I mean, still, there's always a cutoff. There's always the kids that just aren't, they're not going to make it there. Like, no matter how many spots you have, like, you can't have an infinite number of spots for those players. But it's always just that, I have to play D1, I have to play D1, I have to play D1. And, like, even more so for lacrosse, it's one of those things I'm like, all right, you can claim politics only so much. And college coaches, they don't want to hear it. Like, that they're not going to listen to that. They're not going to be like, oh, yeah, that was political. Your kid didn't start, or your kid wasn't all state, or, like, because they evaluate the stuff with their own eyes, and they know. They know when they're being BS. Like, you're not going to pull the wool over a college coach's eyes, because their job is on the line. It's what they do is recruit kids, and they know what they're doing. But yeah, that mentality of, it's, D3 is a fallback is, you're kind of missing the point, in my opinion. I'm like, because really the point should be is like, where's the kid gonna go be happy? Where's he gonna get the education that he needs to be successful in life? Because I'm like, you want to go ride the bench at Lafayette for 4 years and never whiff the field? Maybe get an education you would like, but maybe you'd have been happier somewhere else. But then what? Like, you're not going to the PLL after riding the bench for 4 years at any D1 school. So it's like you could have been playing, being a starter on a D3 or a D2 school, or at least seen significant playing time, had a great time at college, and that could have been your life. And like, all right, but maybe they're having, maybe that kid at Carmel that went to Duke. Well, he went to Duke because it's Duke. He didn't go for Duke for lacrosse.
No, right.
It was a bonus, but I guarantee that kid loved lacrosse, and he was like, you know what, I'm going to go to Duke. If this is the end of my lacrosse career, he was probably okay with that. He's like, but I'm going to try to walk on. And he walked on, and I'm sure the coach is probably like, I bet you he was probably one of the hardest workers in practice. That's the guy that coaches are like, we love the kids like that, because it's anybody who's seen the movie Rudy, like, you got to, like, you want to make a starter look bad? Like, this kid would
bust their butt,
give his life to be in your position, and you're going to slack off? Like, no. Like, every coach loves those guys because, the starters eventually read the headlines too much and be like, they start to believe some of those headlines, and you need that reality check. So
totally, yeah. And it's epidemic. I mean, I only speak it from the experience of the Midwest because that's where I am. I'm sure it's the same way. There are probably kids in
it's everywhere.
Maryland, I think in Maryland or Long Island, it's like legit. They know, like, here's my slot.
You get a little bit more. I think in Maryland, New York, and those places, you get a little bit more comparison because you have a lot more players to compare yourself. Like, whereas kids in the Midwest, like, maybe or maybe not, you get the comparison of going up against another D1 kid, but maybe it's like, oh, we only played Brother Rice once, and that was the only thing. And heard the excuses like, oh, the field was wet, it rained, my kid he wasn't feeling well. That, like, I've heard them all. I've heard all the reasons as to why a kid didn't, beat the guy across the field from him. But I think in, like, some of the hotbed states where it's more concentrated, like, I think there's the opportunity for those wake up calls week in, week out. Like in the MIAA, because you're playing D1 guys every, twice a week. You're playing a bunch of D1 guys. Like, you're like, Notre Dame, Denver, it's like you just go down the lineup. Like, we've populated all the D1 schools in Maryland and a few here, a few there. Right. So it's like, so I think, in some of the areas where it's a little bit more spread out, and it's definitely more spread out here, it's like you just don't get that kind of wake up call as consistently or as regularly as you do somewhere else. I mean, I think that you can go to that in like places like Oregon, California, you're not going to get it quite as often. But I think there's opportunity for kids to kind of be the sleepers. But I think you look at the D1 programs, like there's Ohio State, Michigan, and then you got to go to Denver and Utah for basically the Midwest for D1.
We got Marquette.
Oh, Bellarmine. Yeah, Marquette. Sorry.
Bellarmine, Detroit.
Yeah, so Detroit, Mercy,
Cleveland State. There are D1s right here. I mean,
I was thinking, I was more thinking about the comparison of, all right, but how many D3, NAIA, all those programs, like there's more opportunity. So I think, obviously that's D3 in general, there's just more programs.
And it's great education too. Yeah. I mean, it's about the education. Again, I'm a father. And I keep saying, if you got into, my kid's a smart kid, so I'm lucky there. And I keep saying, if you get into Yale, it's not going to happen. But if you get into Yale and you get an offer to play lacrosse anywhere, you're going to Yale.
Oh yeah,
you're going to Yale.
Yeah.
There's let's weigh this. The whole job is to get into school.
Yeah.
If you can get into the school, that's now if you love lacrosse so much, I think, there's a lot of schools that have the D1 programs that have club lacrosse. You could still play lacrosse if you love it that much. Then you'll know if you actually love it. If all of a sudden you've got to lug your own bag and you're getting up at 6 a.m. with a bunch of guys where you're stuck.
Then you got to raise money for the program.
Right. Or you got to call mom and dad and say, can you give us $1,000 for our thing?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I try to stress it so much without being rude because I think the people they don't get it, and it becomes. I think it causes problems between kids and parents because I've seen it. I've seen dads and moms screaming at their kid about you didn't do this, you didn't do that, and again, I'm not innocent. I've yelled at my kid for doing this, doing that, and then I've looked, like I said, when you see other people do it, and I want to say, let them play. You'll know how good your son is. How many people have come up to you and told you how good your son is or your daughter is? Because there'll be a coach that'll come up to you after the game or after a practice and say, "Hey, nice to meet you."
Yeah.
It could be your travel coach. It could be the other coach. When you can start getting compliments from the other coach or players talking about you, you're getting keyed on, then you start looking.
Yeah.
But if you're not sniffing it on the field on your team as a regular basis, work harder and then figure it out from there.
Well, hopefully some of the parents are actually talking to their kid and be like, what do you want to do? I mean, honestly, my dad always asked me those questions. Like, he had stuff every parent's like, they have, projection. You would love for your son to go to Yale. But I mean, we've talked enough. You just want your son to be happy too. So it's like, it's like, all right, what do you want to do? It's like, every parent should probably ask their kid, like, what is it you want to do? Maybe the parent has deep dreams of D1. Maybe the kid's like, you know what? I want to, like, who knows maybe they want to be a doctor and they'd be like, I can get into Stanford.
Right.
Okay.
That's the best. Right.
Well, all right. Well, I don't want to, like, they don't
have fun.
It's like,
get out there.
Yeah. I'm going to play MCLA and I'm going to go be a doctor. And, that's going to be my life. It's like, and that should not be, it shouldn't be lacrosse first. Every coach, I asked a bunch of the coaches, like, what's the one thing a player can do to make themselves the most recruitable? And every one of them was like, get good grades. Like, it makes their job so much easier to recruit them from that perspective. It's like, all right, if we don't have to worry about a player under grades, but it also, every coach is like, it's going to open so many more doors for you that, it's just going to give you more options. If you put that in your focus, and nobody is ever complained about having too many options. Well, I'm sure someone has complained about having too many options, but having too many options of where you want to go to college is not going to be a bad thing, because then you get to pick on, like, all right, what's best for me? What do I want to do? What position will give me that, to put me in the best spot for a future that will more than likely be outside. I don't know what the statistics are. I haven't looked it up because professional lacrosse really hasn't been a full-time thing until very recently, and we don't know how long that will last. So it's like, it could be the guys that are going into college this year, the POL may not be an option for them by the time they get out. Like, you don't want to, it's hard to know. So yeah, I mean, I think we've probably beat this horse several times, but I think it's also one of those things it's always good to keep coming back to, because I think we get more people to listen and more people kind of tune in, and it's one of those, like, I think a reality check every now and then it's good for everybody. All of us need one, every now and then. I think for parents, as we go into the prospect days, which, I mean, I keep the list of prospect days on the site, and I do all levels, because it's really one of those things, like, parents are like, you need to know what your options are, see where you want to go, and that's kind of how you decide. Like we started at the beginning, like, what coaches are contacting you? Are you getting D3? Are you getting D2? Are you getting D1? And then start to look at those prospect camps. The coaches that are, if you get a coach that contacts you from, Duke, Hopkins, Tufts, Denison, like, probably should go to their prospect camp. That's probably one of those things. Like, that's how you know, because they're not free. So, and be wise with your dollars, and pick. It's one of those things, like, put your kid and you in the best position to get the most bang for your buck. Like, go to the places that have expressed interest, or if you want to take a flyer and be like, you know what, we're going to go to Yale and see what happens. But don't go to Yale, Harvard, and all those places if you keep not hearing back from those schools. Right. Because most of those schools, like, I've been to a number of prospect camps, most of the times it's not just that college's coaching staff. Like, most of the time there's other coaching staffs from the area there and from different levels.
You'll get the NESCAC schools there.
Yeah, so those guys, because, I mean, I went to a High Point camp years ago, and they had D2 and D3 guys coaching there as part of the staff, because they realized, like, all right, we know that every kid at this camp is going to High Point, first of all, or even going D1. So they had an opportunity to see more kids. So, it's one of those, you can look at those things as well. But like, all right, where, maybe you look for a school. If you go to a D1 camp, like, call the coach and be like, hey, who else is going to be there? Find that stuff out and like do your homework. Like, I know one of our things we always go back to is do your homework, do your due diligence. Like, don't go into this blind. Like, the recruiting process can be so confusing, and most parents only do it once. And you're probably an expert by the time you finish, but then it doesn't do you any good because you're probably never going to do it again. So, help yourself out. There's plenty of resources out there. There's, we're try to do plenty of podcasts with coaches and talk to enough people so we know, because I realize like most people may not have access to some people that I can get access to. So I'm always like, I posted the tweet last week about what are your biggest questions.
Right. That's where all this sort of got started.
Yeah, I was like, I'm always curious. And it's like Twitter only allows me to pick 4, so I was hoping like there's a lot more questions about the recruiting process out there that can fit in a Twitter poll. So any of the questions that any of you have, like we'd love to hear them. You can find me at Lax Records. We'll MFWCHI on Twitter. It's like we're easy enough to find. We're active there. I check it every day. So if you have questions about it, like, and you can't find the answer, maybe you don't have not sure how to find the answer, like ask us and we'll figure it out. Like, we'll find the answers because you're not the only one that has those questions. Like, there's plenty of people out there that have those questions. And
everyone has them.
Yeah,
everyone. And the thing, I bring up that poll you had on Twitter because that's where it all started. This is how this got reanimated again. Because the next week I was at a travel team tryout, and I had people come up to me. Can I talk to you for a second? Can I ask you a second? What do you think of my son? And I'm like, I'm not going to, I'm seeing him for 30 seconds. He's great. I just said, I don't know. Tell me about his team. Tell me about what school. Oh, and then when I know the school, and odds are if they're in the Midwest, I've seen their school. I know the school. I've been to the school. And then I could sit there and say, oh, well, talk to this kid on this team or this coach. But it came from that. And I said, if you ever, and I've said this and I've said, I answer almost everything. When people call, people email, people text me, people message me, and I answer. And then I'll actually go and get information from somebody, people who've been through it. If their high school coach might not be sophisticated enough that's dealt with a high-level thing, or they're not on a travel program that might have dealt with it, I'll sit there and say, I'll reach out to somebody. And I hate bringing Chris Garland back into this thing, but
but he's great.
But I find him so generous.
Yeah.
That like even kids that don't play for his program or don't go to his school, like he loves it so much that he's just like, he's so intense about it. Like, I just want people to make the right decision. And he's and you just sit there and go, God, this guy he should be, this should what he should do.
Yeah.
I said it to him the other day and he's like, I do it because I love it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, your passion is unbelievable. So I keep harping back to him, but I ask him a question. What do you think of this kid? What do you think of this? Should he go to this prospect? And he'll ask the same things. Maybe they shouldn't do it. And then I'll relay it.
Yeah.
If I can't answer it, I'll relay it, or I'll know a kid who's on your team. I'm trying to help everybody. I want everyone to do well. I want all the teams to do well. Because again, back to my Midwest thing.
Yep.
I want everyone to get better here to make it, because if everyone's better, eventually you won't have these questions because you'll know where you fit.
You'll get that day in, day out, week in, week out comparison.
Right, exactly.
So you'll know.
Right.
You'll know.
Right. That's good.
So again, we do it early. We'll do it. We still got a little bit more show left, but for anybody who may not want to hear about the POL, Michael, let them know where they can find you on Twitter if they have questions that they need answered.
My Twitter handle is @MFWCHI, and my email is mward@laxrecords.com.
And I am at Lax Records on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/LaxRecords, YouTube.com/LaxRecords, and you can find me at LaxRecords.com. Plenty of places. We are easily findable. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask, because I know there are plenty out there. And I know it was funny when I went to a showcase earlier this summer. I could see like the deer in the headlights from a lot of parents whenever the college coaches were on the stage and be like, what questions do you have? And nobody raised their hands.
But then they go up afterwards.
And they go up afterwards because no one wants it. It's like you're in elementary school again. No one wants to be the one because everybody thinks they'll be dumb. Like everybody else here knows the answer to this question. I want to be. Nobody knows the answer to that question. Everybody has the exact same question in their head, and nobody wants to ask it. So ask us. You send it to me in a DM if you don't want to make it public. It's fine. We never reveal like who asks questions because we know there's so many people with those questions. So please reach out.
Absolutely. That's how I started this, because I had questions, and then I kept learning answers, and then people kept asking me, and then this is how it blossomed to me getting to this situation that I'm in right now with you, because I had questions.
Yeah,
that's how it started.
All right, so now we're going to kind of not a great segue we got here this week, but why not? We kind of want to, because the Premier Lacrosse League, the PLL, is wrapping up its season, and I think we've had. I think 2 podcasts where we've kind of discussed, maybe 3, I can't really remember at this point in time, over the past year where we've kind of talked about them. But we figure it's probably a good time to kind of check in because I know we both had opinions. I haven't gone back and listened to our original podcast of like what we thought, like, the kind of traveling circus idea and, the not home base team concept would work. I mean, we obviously had opinions about a few things at the start, but figured it'd be worth kind of revisiting what we thought of the PLL during season 1. I'll let you kind of kick it off.
Well, what I thought you could easily find because I wrote an article about it, so it's not like I could hide from it. My only concern was, my major concern was I didn't think the traveling team sort of like tour would work.
Yeah,
because we've seen that model before.
Yeah, the LXM Pro did the similar thing.
Right. So that was my question. They have all the top talent. I mean, with the exception of a few players, they have the top talent you want to see.
Yeah.
So
there's not a last place team. I know physically and officially there is a last place, but there is not a last place team in that league.
Right. I mean, it's like, a ball bounces this way. It's a completely different game. So I will say this. I haven't watched one Major League Lacrosse game this year. And that's something because I used to watch them all that I could, where I could find them when I can get them. I know where to find them this year. I just haven't put myself out to do it. I have on my phone alerts from the PLL, what time the games are with, and I catch every game.
Yeah.
I either have it on my phone or when it's on NBC Sports, I could watch it on, I put it on TiVo or whatever, you can record it. So I'm catching all the games. Another thing is I don't particularly care about the MLL. There's not a Midwest team. There's not a Chicago team or an Ohio team. So it's like, it honestly seems like to me, it honestly seems like every weekend the Lizards are playing the Cannons. Like it seems like every weekend I'm like, oh, what? And I'm like, I don't really care about Boston and New York.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like almost built into me to not care for them.
Yeah.
And Rob Pennell is one of my favorite players. I think he's great. But I'm like, I don't care. I actually care about these teams. Like I have 2 favorite teams in the PLL. Like, I want them to win. I want them to win.
Yeah.
Like it's a sit down at my house with my wife, my daughter, and my son. We were watching the PLL 2 games the other day.
Yeah.
I had my phone and I hooked it into my TV, because I don't like little screens. I like big screens.
Yeah.
And we all were sitting there watching the games. And like it was football.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we just did this. We're having lunch. We got the game on. Let's watch it. So then I went back and thought to myself, I'm like, okay, my whole reasoning, thinking I wouldn't like it, would be the traveling circus, let's say, but it's not a circus.
Not having a geographic
right. So it made me
bound.
Right. Now I think one of the teams that I like is the Redwoods because it's almost all Notre Dame players. So I'm like, okay, there's my Midwest connection.
Which was part of their plan. They, the Whip Snakes are mostly Maryland. They tried to, it was part of their plan.
So there are other teams that I don't like because of their teams.
Yeah.
But because of their players. But then the innovations they have done, the in-game interviews, the excitement, the access. I mean, I remember earlier this year you were unhappy with the access you got in Chicago.
Yeah.
as a
Reporter.
member of the press. And it might have been on purpose. You were like, are they trying to do this?
Yeah.
Because I think they do I think they're doing the, let's call it the Donald Trump method. They're coming right at you with their own content. They don't need anyone to do their.
They want to control the message.
Right. But they're controlling the message on the sideline during the game.
Yeah.
With the coaches. I mean, every coach is a character. Every coach is compelling. The players are compelling. Like, if you were to start a league, and I never thought I'd be this pro PLL. Okay.
Yeah.
I had reservations. Like I thought MLL would be the one gobbling them up. If I had to look at this right now, I'd say it's going to be the other way around. And two of these leagues can't exist.
Right.
And the model that the PLL is doing is the model that's going to work. Do I think forever it'll work with the traveling? No. Maybe it'll be a region. I don't know what they're going to do. I definitely know that they need probably two more teams to thin it out. Maybe, get, although there was a blowout this weekend, but to get maybe a blowout or something up and down. But that's beside the point. They have done everything perfect in my mind. I mean, they haven't had a hiccup. They might have had a hiccup with you from your aspect of being a reporter. But as far as the fan experience, I don't see one. I mean, they even handled the Paul Rabel situation with Warrior. I mean, they made themselves look great with that. Paul Rabel's already changing a look too, by the way. I thought Paul Rabel was sort of at his tail end, washed up. Not washed up, but tail end. And I'm like, this guy's going to be like 1 year be in the front office. It's sort of revived him. I think he's made a point to himself, like he's got to be in better shape. Like he looks like he's, 22 again, and he's a monster. Then he's got so in the All-Star game, he tucked his jersey in and flipped the top of his shorts to get him a little higher and showed the waistband.
Yeah.
He was the only one who did it.
Yeah.
I've been on the lacrosse field over the last 2 weeks, and almost every kid's doing it.
Yeah.
He did. It's not. I mean, he just started a trend in one game.
Yeah.
I mean, every kid was doing it, and I'm like, wow, that's power. I mean, that's power. So I take my hat off to him. I say, keep it up. Can we keep it up? Of course, I'll be a little bit skeptical, but they seem to be getting more money behind them. I don't care about, everyone likes to talk about the attendance. They keep pushing their attendance. Oh, we had 12,000, we had 8,000. I don't care about the attendance. They're not going to make their money on the gate. Their money is going to be made on, eyeballs watching on TV, advertising dollars, subscription dollars. That's where they're going to make their money. And I'm in. I'm in. I actually just bought a Roku yesterday. A shameless plug, bing, bing. So that I can watch it without having my phone. I could put it on that Roku and I could sit on my TVs. So, with football season coming up, I get football, lacrosse in my man cave and be in heaven. With my phone, do my fantasy. So I went out and bought one yesterday. Again, being a 50-year-old man, I thought, I'm cutting edge now on this Roku. I had to ask the guy at Best Buy. Again, and I was at Best Buy. And I had to ask, like, okay, so how do I do this? He's like, well, you just plug it in, and then you just press whatever you want. Right. And I'm like, okay. And I walked out like a conquering hero. But this is all because of what the PLL has done. So, again, I'm only looking forward to going forward. I do love the teams. Everything that I disliked about it, it's won me over, so I'm happy. I think it's great for the future. I think it's great. Again, every aspect of where I come from is growth. And if we can get some kids in Nebraska who are watching this and say, I want to play lacrosse, and they are, and there is lacrosse in Nebraska. There is lacrosse in the heartland.
Yeah.
There is lacrosse in the South.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. And if they could make it be, instead of being out in front when we were kids, like, oh, I'm Michael Jordan or I'm Dr. J or whoever at your time was, I just saw someone say, oh, my kid was in the driveway saying he was Ryder Garnsey.
Yeah.
That's how you grow the sport. So they're doing everything I like. They've made me happy about this, what they've done, and they've done everything that I want to be done as far as trying to grow the sport. And I think they are going to be. I think they are the leader, and I think they just have been making the right moves. And so I'm pleasantly surprised, and I congratulate them, and I only wish the best for it going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think their marketing has been second to none. I mean, I think the way they started this whole thing with the announcement of the league in general and all this stuff, like their marketing team is, borderline genius. Obviously, it takes more than one season to really see how it plays out, because you got to see, like, all right, you have an off season. There's a lot of, there's a, you got to see what season 2 holds. Like, do they keep the audience, or because you do the same thing over and over again. There's a potential of, like, oh, we've kind of seen this thing over and over again. Like, so it's always one of those things, like, there's a lot of excitement year one. I guess I'm much more reserved. Like, I want to see it succeed, but I also want to say, I'm like, all right, I guess I'm more of the opinion, like, they do need to get some gate, because renting stadiums isn't cheap, and you figure it's got to at least break even.
Well, they got to move to a smaller stadium,
and no one wants to play in front of an empty stadium.
Right.
No one wants to do that. Like, so
the optics are bad there.
Yeah, so you want to. I mean, I know. I saw a tweet from them earlier today. Said Albany's close to selling out. Obviously Hopkins sold out. Like,
that's beautiful.
The area,
stadium.
the places you would expect. I mean, obviously Hopkins is built for lacrosse. So I mean, but Gillette, it looks empty because you're playing in a football stadium. Even when I went to SeatGeek Stadium, which is in Major League Soccer Stadium, it looked pretty much empty, even though they said they had, I think, 5,000 to 7,000. I don't remember what the exact gate was. So, I mean, I still think, optics-wise, if people look at it and be like, oh, that place is empty, like, that's the impression that it gives. So, that people walk away with whatever. So, I mean, I guess I do think, like, they need to figure out the stadium thing. I mean, no one's building a lacrosse-only stadium for them at this point. I mean, there's a couple Major League Lacrosse stadiums that are now empty, but
there's a nice stadium right in Ohio that I don't think they could play in, because that was made for, I don't know, I think there was a contract with MLL, the Fortress Obets, which was made for lacrosse. It's an awesome, cool place, which I'd love to go see a game there.
And Chicago Fire is not going to be playing at SeatGeek anymore, so
there's a oh God,
so
that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, there's places to be played, but then again, we just talked about how that place appeared empty, even though there was a lot of people there. So I mean, I guess I'm more to the opinion, like, oh well, they do need attendance. I mean, even NFL blacks out games when it's not sold out in certain areas, because they want to push people towards the gate, because it's not just the gate. You also figure that fan experience. They sell. When I was there was a lot of merchandise, a lot of beer being sold, a lot of sponsors that were there to put hawk their wares in front of a audience that they knew would be interested in them, because obviously they're there for lacrosse. So lacrosse is a beautiful thing. It's like you know your audience, and you can kind of zero in on what they're going to be interested in. So I think it has more to do in just the seats. Like, you want to get that experience that you just won't get sitting in your man cave watching it on TV, because maybe you go online and buy a hat, a jersey, and stuff like that, but you're more likely to do it after you've had a beer or two and you've just been watching the game and you're a little bit hyped up and like, I'm gonna walk down, I'm gonna get a hat, like, kind of thing. So merchandise seemed to be a big part of their programming, and the stuff that they do. I mean, that's part of marketing. You get more people wearing your gear, people want, like, oh, this stuff nice. I mean, again, we're on an audio podcast, so if you want to do it, like,
you show it though.
I love this POL hat. Like, I like it so much, I barely wear it because I don't want to get it dirty, because like I really like this hat. So but I bought it because I was there, and I was really disappointed because when the first two I went to 3 different stands to get it, because the other 2 were sold out, and they're like, there's one more place, and they're like, it's upstairs, and it was like one of the last 2. So obviously it's a very popular hat, but I'm like, I probably wouldn't have gone online. Like, there's so many times I'm lazy. Like, I want it. Like, I'm like, oh, I want it now. I'm gonna forget by the time I sit in traffic in an hour on the way home, and eat dinner and all that stuff. I'm gonna forget about it. So I think the stadium probably has a little bit more to do with some of that as well. So I mean, but then again, it's their first year. I'm sure they have learned so much about what works and what doesn't. I guess I'm also like, I can't point to something specific because I have not. It's not that I haven't watched Premier Lacrosse League. I think we were talking before, like I just haven't watched a lot of TV in the past month or so. Been busy with a lot of other things. But it's one of those, like, I'm sure they've learned a lot in season 1. Like I've seen on Twitter, like I don't think they've been perfect. Like I've seen people raise, obviously you're not going to make everybody happy to begin with. So
No,
Twitter is a horrible judge.
Especially on Twitter. Right.
Twitter is a horrible judge. But there's no way they've been perfect. So I've started, like, because if they've been perfect, there's nowhere for them to go. So I'm sure they've learned a lot after season 1 that we will then see what happens in season 2. Like, they played with the face-off and the All-Star game. Did they see anything they didn't like? I mean, you don't want to tell Trevor Baptiste, like, we got nowhere for you next year.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do that, considering he's like one of their faces of the league.
So it's like, but they played, there's no way that was just something they were trying just to get interested in the All-Star game. Like, I'm sure that was a place to test. So it'd be interesting to see, like, are they seeing something? Obviously, the stuff with the, not the Olympics, drawing a blank, with 6-on-6 came out, I think, last week. So, and again, no face-off. That seems to be the biggest and best way to get people in lacrosse riled up on both sides of the aisle.
Oh, God.
So
did you see that there was a game played that they showed as a game?
No, I didn't see that.
It was horrible. I mean, it was horrible. It was horrible. It was. If that's what they're going to try to do, I won't watch it. I will not watch it. Like, I'll go out of my way to smash my TV in if that's what they're putting on there. It's not lacrosse.
Yeah.
Like, I think there were coaches who actually were. It was on Twitter, so there was actually a coach who was like, I wouldn't show, if this was my team practice, I wouldn't have showed this on social media.
Yeah.
That's how bad it looked. And I'm like, it was like slow and bad. Anyway, but yeah.
Yeah.
PLL.
We'll stick with the PLL. But, it's like, I am pro PLL. I want to see it because I think I look at other sports, like, generally things trickle down from the top. So the more success the PLL has, and again, I'm kind of like you. Like, I think I was always, like, MLL has made a lot of stumbles this year alone. And I think you just combine the previous, 10, 15 years before. And if they haven't reached a certain level of success, like, it's probably not going to happen now. Like, unless there is a complete overhaul of management in this offseason and they just get the PLL's marketing team in to switch leagues, like, it's going to be really hard to kind of roll that boulder back uphill. So I think I'm with you. Like, if there can be only one. I don't think lacrosse is big enough at this point to survive two. I mean, let's be honest, like, none of these sports are big enough to survive two leagues. Like NFL, it's all one league, right, unless you count soccer, which is, multiple continents.
I don't count it.
But, it's like there's going to be one that's going to make it. PLL, in what we've seen, seems to have the drive and motivation and the marketing to make it happen. Because, like you, like, I think it helps they have specific days that they play the games. Everybody knows when they're on. Like, we talked about that earlier with, like, even high school stuff. Friday Night Lights. They don't do Friday night, but there's games on Saturday and Sunday. I think probably the geographic thing would help for probably cut down on cost. Don't have 6 teams traveling, or 8, because I imagine expansion will probably be in the future of the league.
I would assume. Yeah.
So I mean, if you collapse the MLL, like, I'm sure they're going to at least want a few of those guys. And none of those guys want to ride the bench for most of a game either. So you got to find a place to play.
Right.
So I'm thinking, like, how expensive must it be for all those teams and all those players to travel week after week to different locations? So I think, probably for expense wise, like, eventually it'll settle. But then again, I look at, I'm like, pretty sure that the touring model is probably a pretty good test. But, like, where could we probably settle and have success at the gate and fill a stadium and all that? So, Baltimore probably put a pretty good pin in the ground and, like, put a flag in the ground, like, hey, we would support, something here. I mean,
well, if you could play it at Hopkins, I mean, here, I just keep thinking when you talk about venues, I don't know if you've been to Northwestern University lately.
No.
And seen the women's lacrosse field.
Just in pictures.
It might be one of the most impressive. It's on the water.
Yeah.
So you're looking over Lake Michigan, and then the downtown Chicago is. Yeah. It's beautiful. Like, remember we had an earlier show where we said where would be one place. That place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. Evanston is in a pretty good area as far as lacrosse. I mean, I'm sure you can get some people there, and although it's a little tucked in, it's a little difficult to get all the way up in there.
The train does go up there, though.
It does. But here, I'd tell you what, no matter where I was in Chicago, I'd much rather go to Evanston to Northwestern than to go to Bridgeview.
Yeah, that's true.
And to SeatGeek Stadium.
I work down in that area.
Right. I mean, there's no chance.
But Bridgeview is not. There's nothing to do.
Right.
Well, in its defense, I don't know why I'm trying to defend it because I don't live there, but there is a lot of construction going on around that stadium with hotels and restaurants.
Yeah, well,
I feel bad for them now that the Chicago Fire has decided to vacate, so I don't know what they're going to do. But at any rate, there's not a lot to do, outside of a, football, soccer, professional league, not a whole lot to do. Like, I kind of related. Me and my buddy, he came up from Maryland. We went to Milwaukee Brewers game. And Brewers Stadium, gorgeous stadium, middle of nowhere. I have never been to a baseball game where I've seen more tailgaters in my entire life. I've saw more grills on the walk from my car to the stadium. Like, I was like, we've been to Cubs games, I've been to Oriole games, like, but it's in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like,
but that's Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, it was funny.
They'll tailgate anywhere.
Yeah, my buddy made it. He's like, when I think of Wisconsin and Brewers games, he's like, this is what I think of. I'm like, yeah. I was like, but it's one of those. I'm like, there's nothing there, but I'm like, you're not gonna get that in Bridgeview.
No.
So I think even the train that goes through was like, if you get someplace like you need to find some venues. But then again, I would love to just be like someone at some point, succeed or fail. I hope someone in the PLL offices one day writes a book about what is it like to start a professional sporting league.
In a year.
In this day and age, because I mean, when NFL and NBA and baseball, like those leagues are so old, it's the creation of those is almost irrelevant at this point because it's such a different time. In this day and age with social media and streaming and like it's just like the MLL started in a different time and they followed a certain pattern. The PLL came in and a time whenever access to fans, like just so much access to where you don't need quite the marketing budget that you would have had to do like NFL and stuff like that. Like there's they've turned a lot of things on their head, like just their marketing and almost like I find that almost more interesting than the actual games on the field because of what it means for the sport and what it means for professional sports. Because I'm interested to see if anybody, NBC has probably learned a lot. I'm like, we're gonna do this for football.
And helmet interviews.
Yeah,
that's gonna happen for sure.
So you'll see. I'm sure Vince McMahon is looking at some stuff for the XFL whenever if and when that actually cranks up. But it's for me that's interesting. I'm like, hopefully someone someone I mean they've done a good job of pulling back the curtain in general. But, to actually sit down, like, I'm sure there's a lot we don't know. Like, what were those inner workings like, 2 years before the league ever actually got off the ground or was an announcement? Like, what were those meetings like? Like, how are we going to pull this off? Like, what are we going to do? Like, sleepless nights of, I'm sure, like, even Paul Rabel, as successful as he is, probably like, what if this doesn't work? Like, what were those thoughts like?
I still think he has sleepless nights.
I mean, it's not over. Like, it's not. I mean, so there's a long way to go before this thing is. You can coast and be like, all right, even if we have a bad year, we're still going to be all right. Like right now, a bad year can.
Pressing.
Yeah. I mean,
constantly.
So it's going to be interesting. I've always thought had the opportunity, been fortunate enough to talk to Paul on several occasions about various things, and I've always come away with like he's a sharp dude. Like my always opinion of Paul is like he's got a better business mind than a lacrosse mind, which to me is saying quite a lot because he's always kind of seemed like a guy that always has his eyes a few miles down the road. Like,
yeah.
Not that he's not paying attention to what's going on in the moment, but like he's that chess player that sees 4 steps ahead of the player across from him. Like I've always thought Paul was a sharp guy. So honestly, when he announced that he was doing a league, I was like, he's surrounded himself with smart people. He's hung around Belichick long enough. Like there's a lot of, he's surrounded himself with intelligent people and he's intelligent himself. And, so it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, there's nothing, you can't argue about the product on the field, but, I'll be curious to see what this offseason is like. Like, as much as I enjoy the players and watching all the stuff they do is like I'm kind of curious about the offseason, like what's going to happen, because I don't think their marketing ends when the championship ends.
No,
like they're going to try
well,
like this is
this
going to
whole
be
thing's about the draft.
Yeah.
The playoff format is fantastic.
Yeah.
They're playing for the number 1 draft pick too. Like that's great. It's not like you could tank. You can't tank to get the number 1 pick. You have to win for the number 1. I mean, it's just a great. They've figured out what everyone has complained about on other sports and said, hey, let's try to do this. Let's try to do that. And they're mobile enough to be able to do that. They're nimble enough as a company and as an association to do it right now. If this becomes a bigger and bigger thing, they won't be able to have the opportunities to make changes on the fly.
Yeah.
You see a bad call in the NFL and you're like, how could that even happen? And you're like, oh, 2 years later they make a change.
Yeah. And you have all the owners have to
week
vote.
To week. Right. PLL, something happened. They're like, oh, we're tweaking it next week. It's this. We're going to change this. So, I mean, that's the advantage of being a smaller startup, I guess. But the foresight to do it. I mean, this is a business model. Again, the start of a business.
Yeah.
That if you were going to launch something, I mean, I put this up there as a disruptor, a sports disruptor, like you would with Uber.
Yeah.
And I know that's such the millennial thing to say is it's the Uber of this, it's the Uber of that. Well, he just took he made a major professional sport. He was in a league 1 year, and the next year started his own league, competing against the league he left, and he has done it better than the league he left in 1 year.
Yeah.
Like he's a celebrity now. Like you see him on People magazine and like things like he's a fashion stylist now.
Yeah.
I mean, he also knows that make your players accessible, make them part of the story. So, they've got every time you see just compelling stories that are just every week. It's like they haven't made a misstep. And in this day and age, and for me, I'm a critical person when it comes to certain things. I look at things. I'm always looking to see where someone's going to screw up or somewhere where it is. They haven't made like a social media mistake.
Yeah.
Especially in the current climate that we're in, where everything is so polarizing and everything is so you're either this way or that way. There's no give. There's no take.
Yeah. That
they haven't had something that made, I'm boycotting it. Like,
yeah.
I mean, you sneeze although people were saying they were going to boycott New Balance. Remember that 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
We're boycotting Warrior or New Balance because they fired Paul Rabel.
Yeah.
That's how that they haven't made that kind of mistake as a new organization yet. I'll knock wood. Is amazing. I mean, it's amazing. You look at major corporations; they can't go a week without stepping on their junk. I mean, literally, they don't. Dick's Sporting Goods every week they're doing something stupid. Some other company. This guy has been doing it for not even a year, and it's just like he's a lot smarter than I thought. I mean, I always thought, like you said, the guy knew how to market himself from day one. I mean, he was the first $1 million man in lacrosse.
Yeah.
He really is that good. I mean, again, I wasn't the biggest Paul Rabel fan.
Yeah.
And I'm still not the biggest Paul Rabel fan. Like, I don't watch it to watch Paul Rabel.
Yeah.
Like, I have players that I want to watch. He's not necessarily one of them.
Yeah.
But I sit there and I think this guy has to be smiling under his face mask every time. I mean, when they talk to him, he's cracking jokes. He hasn't made a misstep yet. And I have to just say, wow, good for him, good for the sport, good for all of us who are fans.
Yeah.
Because if this momentum can carry on, it's going to be good for all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, think of that. Think if this becomes the NFL size.
Yeah.
In a few years. And, a couple of, people like you and I who are in the media, this is something that it could heighten our career, so to speak. As someone who knows about it, because all of a sudden there might be a guy at, on Channel 32 who's the sports guy. I'm like, I know nothing about lacrosse, but now there's this thing. So let me ask Mike Loveday and have you on. I mean, this is something that could happen from here. So I mean, rising tide lifts all boats. I say it
Yeah.
all the time. So, I mean, that's
Well, the interest in professional sports, I think it started to make the point earlier and probably got sidetracked. But the bigger the professional end grows, I think the more opportunity you'll see. It'll trickle down, like because I think if there's colleges aren't stupid. If they see a revenue potential and they see like, oh, the interest in lacrosse is really on the rise, and as we've seen, like football, baseball, some of these other sports are on the decline. Like you have the potential of starting more D1, D2, D3 lacrosse programs, and then there's more high school programs because there's more demand because more kids are trying to play it because they were like, oh, they see the Paul Rabels or whomever, Matt Rambo's, like whoever they see play that they want to emulate, they see them play, and then I've seen stories all year for years and years about kids who just wanted to play lacrosse, so they started programs at their school because it wasn't available. Like you'll start to see some more of that, but again, I think it trickles down because you'll see kids who aren't necessarily interested in lacrosse now that will find it through NBC and through the PLL that momentum. Like I think that's kind of the stuff you'll start to see kind of grow and really help the sport grow. So that's why I'm very, let's see this succeed. Let's see how it goes, and hopefully it does do what it has the potential to do. Because I think right now, like I'm not a stock. You're the stock guy. I think it's very bullish on the PLL. Like I think
I'm
it's
bullish.
got, I think it's got the potential to be huge, and that's why I'm interested in the off season. Be like, all right, how do you? Because the NFL never really goes away.
Never. Never.
All the professional leagues like baseball. I think I think I probably lose hockey more than anything. Like I don't really know what happens in the hockey off season, the 3 months
True.
that it is. But other than that, NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, like there's something goes on in the off season because they all have their own networks and they have to talk about something. Winter meetings and preparing for like. So it'll be interesting to see what the PLL has in store for the off season because I'm curious. More because I'm curious. Like we've never had an off season after a league, so I'm like, what are they going to do different in the off season to keep interest up and to keep people coming back? Like, I'm curious. So,
Right, that's a good point. That's their next move.
yeah,
That's the next thing. Like, stay tuned. Like, I'm sure that they're going to have something.
because they're not really owners of the teams like there are in other sports. So I'm like, they don't really need a winter meeting. Like, it's
Right.
like where all the owners of the teams come in.
They're all shareholders, so
Yeah.
they're all equity partners. So it's all in their best interest to do as much as possible.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be a lot of players are going to do clinics.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is sponsored by the PLL, which they just did a few in Ohio last week.
yeah,
Which is smart. I would think, with some of these big fall prospect days or tournaments, you'd think they'd want to put their name on somewhere at some point.
bring back some of your alma mater guys.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure. Yeah, I mean that's a very good point, and again, that's what I'm looking forward to. That as much as I'm looking forward to see how their championship is in week 3 of the NFL.
Yeah, September 21st, 22nd, somewhere
Yeah.
around there. And
So
they're playing in
let's-
Philly, so an NFL
Yeah, oh, yeah.
hotbed.
I mean, like I said, I will be watching it because I have more screens to watch it, and that's also probably a benefit now in the day and age because people do have computer screen, TV screen, iPad, TVs,
and low attention span, so we hate
right,
commercials.
right. So, but it will be interesting if they could pull in any. If they could pull any good numbers, that would be encouraging to them. I don't think I think they might fudge their numbers a little bit. No one comes out with. We had 12,000 here, 10,000 here. They could make statistics their own way, but again, it's not my business. I'm not a shareholder. I'm not.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how in the middle of beginning of a potential Eagles Super Bowl hopeful run, how many people will be interested in the championship of the PLL on September 21st. I guess it'll depend on how Carson Wentz's early season goes, how that knee holds up.
I think they're also one of the playoff weekends is in Columbus.
Yeah,
Or Cleveland.
I think it's
one of
Columbus.
them.
I think
Is
it's
it Columbus?
I think Columbus is week 1. I think.
Okay, so that's Ohio State football.
Yeah.
That's bigger than anything.
Yeah.
Although the Cleveland Browns might be the biggest thing
No, I think
this
Ohio
year.
State's probably still pretty big. I'd still bank on Ohio State over Cleveland at this point.
True, but there's so much hype about Cleveland and the Browns this year with that team they've got. So, but that I mean, again, they're walking into the belly of the beast. I mean,
Yeah.
like let's go where the. I mean, that should be also interesting. So
Yeah, it's gonna
right.
be that'll be. I mean, there's also you see how that tweaked. Like, did they start the season earlier? Like, it'll be interesting to see. Like I said, I'm looking. We'll stop. We'll kind of end it here in the next couple minutes. But it's one is like I think for me is like I'm interested in kind of the. I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Like I'd love to just be like almost a biographer and be like I'm just gonna follow you guys around and see what you do. Like how do you navigate this process in a league in a day and age when everything's documented? And I mean, part of what they've done is document it. It's all on YouTube. But I'm sure there's a lot we don't see. Like there's still, as much as they show us, there's still a lot they don't show because there's a secret sauce. Like they don't want to give it to everybody, and they don't want anybody. They definitely don't want the MLO to see it and steal what they got. And like they got, I mean, of course, the MLO hasn't taken any cues out of their book. You can't help them at this point. But at any rate, like it's one of those like it'll be interesting to see what they do. So like I'm interested to seeing that off the field stuff because I don't know why I find it interesting, but I'm like it's not every day you get to see a league be born. I mean, obviously I was around when the MLS started, but I have no interest in soccer, so I didn't care. So, it's one of those like, but this is a sport I'm interested in and invested in. So I think I just find it that much more level of interesting. And, not very often you get to have spoken to the founder of a league, years before he did it. And you had an opinion of him before. And like, I always thought he was sharp. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, this will probably, it'll be fun to watch. So it's going to be fun. Like I said, we'll be interested in seeing the turnout during football season because they really haven't had to compete in anything like that, and they're playing obviously Philly in September. Eagles fans are going to be out, and it's good. It's Eagles season at that point. Maybe the 76ers. I don't know how good the 76ers are expected to be, but they're still about a month away from starting that season. So Flyers maybe, but Eagles have high expectations. Eagles have high expectations.
Right, absolutely.
This is where I'll throw out my Go Redskins and shy away because I know we're going to be bottom of the barrel. But at any rate, I threw that out to Greg Grenling the other day because he was excited about the start of Eagles season. But at any rate, so we'll do it again one more time for those of you who decided to stick around. Michael, where can they find you online if they want to chat about the PLL?
You could reach me on Twitter at MFWCHI, or you could email me at mward@laxrecords.com.
And at Lax Records on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/LaxRecords, and YouTube.com/LaxRecords, and of course, LaxRecords.com. Everybody, have a week.